Welcome, please settle down, kids. Today we have to look at basically the bad luck counter. Just how unlikely has every spec been when it comes to having to recraft your legendary, because it could come at a pretty hefty cost, especially if you are one of those specs that happen to be able to use, different legendaries. Let's say you can use like 3 of them. Or maybe you happen to play multiple specs. Maybe you play a couple of specs with a couple of legendaries each, and in 9.1 you will have to recraft them. Now, we have talked about this already, you should not be surprised by this point. In 9.1 there is going to be Shards of Domination in fixed slots in your gear, just like the legendaries have fixed slots in your gear, except Shards of Domination take precedence because they don't have multiple slots, they only have 5 and they are fixed for everyone. Helms, shoulders and chest are for all of the armor types, and then bracers and belts for cloth, gloves and boots for leather, belt and boots for mail, and bracers and gloves for plate. So, because those 5 slots are going to be fixed, the legendaries, who can be crafted in different slots, are the ones you will have to change. For this very same reason, Blizzard in 9.1 is going to add to the recipe of the legendary a different 3rd slot, just so you won't have to put them into conflict, right, with the Shards of Domination slots. And we should also remind everyone, because this is very important, that once 9.1 hits, Venari will no longer sell the spatial realignment apparatus. So Venari will no longer sell the Season 1 socket purchasable with Stygia. The reason why you want to buy it is because those sockets, even though they are still Season 1 sockets, even though they still read add a socket to a Shadowlands Season 1 item, legendaries up to rank 4, legendaries up to item level 235, still count as a Season 1 item. So even once 9.1 hits, if you have kept a socket from Venari, you can craft a rank 4 legendary and apply this, we should call it old socket, because in 9.1 you will have to buy the new Season 2 socket, which comes at the price of Archived Research, which is basically the new Stygia of Korthia, of the new zone, or the new addition of Blizzard in 9.1, you can also buy 1 socket for 1000 Soul Cinders, Soul Cinders being the replacement of Soul Ash. Soul Ash will now go into the back and will just be used to buy basically up to rank 4 legendaries if you still need them. So, back to our bad luck counter. Which of the specs are going to require to change their legendaries? Thanking Squishy and Wowhead for making this entire list, because I would be way too lazy to draft it up myself. When we go over and look at the tanks, we start with Blood DK. Blood DK is relatively unlucky because Super Strain is the legendary for Blood in Mythic Plus, and it will require to be recrafted in 9.1, because generally speaking, and this is what is going to annoy people, you have been suggested, you have been told to craft the legendary in the slot with the biggest amount of stats, because legendaries are going to have higher item level than a normal piece of gear. So 235 item level right now, they will be able to go all the way to 260 item level in 9.1. So because they have higher item level, they have higher stats, so you want to craft them in the chest, in the shoulders, in the helmet and in the pants, right? The slots with the biggest amount of stats, which is also exactly the slots in which Shards of Domination are going to end up in, so you're getting screwed. After Blood Death Knight you have Vengeance. Well, not much to say, because Vengeance only has 1 primary legendary that has to be recrafted, and it's Fiery Soul, which is the legendary of Vengeance Demon Hunters that everyone is using. You will have to recraft that as well. Guardian Druid has a vast list of legendaries that need to be recrafted, but luckily your legendary for Guardian, Ursox Fury Remembered, isn't one of the group. Yes, technically the Natural Order's Will is still a, reasonable legendary to use and to craft for Guardian, so you still might want to recraft it. When it comes to Brewmaster, not much wiggle room, because both of your damaged legendaries and usable legendaries for Brewmaster, Stormstout, Laskeg and Charred Passions will need to be recrafted. Protection Paladin is the same. Protection Paladin goes ham on DPS in Mythic Plus, so Holy Avengers, Engraved Sigil and Bulwark of Righteous Fury both need to be recrafted. And lastly, Prot Warrior. Once again, in Mythic Plus, the Wall is the most used legendary and it will have to be recrafted. For clarity, if you see the red asterisk next to the legendary, is because that is going to be the new slot added by Blizzard in 9.1, which means currently, if you're reading this and it's still 9.0.5, those are not craftable yet. So you can't craft Crimson Rune Weapon in the belt slot because Crimson Rune Weapon right now can only be crafted in the shoulders and in the gloves. You cannot craft Storm Stout Last Keg in the belt because it's only craftable in the shoulders and in the gloves, which is exactly why Blizzard is adding this extra slot in 9.1, because the previous two are going to be Shards of Domination slots on your gear. Now, what about healers? Well, Resto Druids get their Vision of Unending Growth, so their #1 raid legendary, recrafted, and this is where it starts to get somewhat worse, because for tanks, most of those legendaries were a one-use legendary that you used in all content, like Storm Stout Last Keg for Brewmaster, like Fiery Soul for Vengeance Demon Hunter, even the Wall for Prot Warrior. But now you start seeing situations where, for example, a Resto Druid would want to play with Vision of Unending Growth, and when you look at Mythic Plus, Verdant Infusion is currently the most used legendary. So you have your most used legendary in raids and in Mythic Plus, which will both need to be recrafted. So we are talking about having to have stockpiled over 10,000 Soul Ash to be able to recraft these. And the thing goes on, because Mistweaver Monk in raids is going to be using Ancient Teachings of the Monastery, and in Mythic Plus is going to be using Tear of Mourning. Guess what? Both of these have to be recrafted. Meanwhile, Holy Paladin is lacking out, because Shock Barrier, so the most used legendary for all of the Paladins playing the Glimmer build, will not need to be recrafted, so you're safe, you're fine. Who isn't fine is Discipline. Discipline is also using two different legendaries, Clarity of Mind when it comes to raiding, and very often in Mythic Plus, Twins of the Sun Priestess, sometimes in raids as well. Both of those are going to be recrafted. When it comes to Holy Priest, guess what? Their only legendary that they use constantly, Flesh Concentration, at least in raid encounters, it's like 100% usage, will also require to be recrafted. And lastly, for healers, you have Restoration Shaman, which has Primal Tidecore, the most used legendary in raid, and decently used in Mythic Plus as well, will also require to be recrafted. So going from tanks to healers, it's a disaster when it comes to healers compared to tanks. Basically, all of the main legendaries are present for all of the specs, and even most of the Mythic Plus legendaries are going to require a recrafting for healers. When it comes to Frost DK, it's the same. It's actually kind of bad, because Rage of the Frozen Champion, Cold Tira's Favor, and Biting Cold, which are all of the most used legendary in both Mythic Plus and Raids, all need to be recrafted. Maybe you add 250 IQ. Maybe when you crafted Cold Tira's Favor, you were like, you know what, I don't want the shoulder piece. I don't want to craft it in the shoulder piece. I want to be a hipster and craft it in the finger slot. Maybe when you crafted Biting Cold, you said, the helmet? Pfft, I'm gonna craft it on the belt. So you lucked out and you won't need to recraft, right? It's possible. I've seen some hipsters, crafting the legendary in a smaller piece sometimes. Unholy only gets one legendary to recraft, but it's a pretty important one because it's Deadliest Coil, which is one of their most used legendary in both types of content. When it comes to Havoc Demon Hunter, same thing. Burning Wound and Chaos Theory are very usable, used and popular legendaries which will require to be recrafted. Same goes for Feral. All three of his most used legendaries, Drought of Deep Focus, Apex Predator's Craving and Circle of Life and Death, all require to be recrafted, unless none of these slots are the new slots added by Blizzard in 9.1. So you could have crafted the Drought of Deep Focus in the necklace, the Apex Predator's Craving in the waist and the Circle of Life and Death in a ring. You could have done this already. Finally, we struck some luck, because to all of the 17 Survival Hunter players, you basically will not care. You will not care because the only legendary that is going to be affected by this is going to be Nezingueri's Trapping Apparatus, which you don't care about because you don't use it. You're going to most of the time be using Wildfire Cluster, and because Wildfire Cluster is crafted in the waist or in the legs, that's not a Shard of Domination slot, so you're fine. Windwalker Monk, unfortunately, gets to recraft Invoker's Delight, which is their to-go legendary. Red Paladin gets to recraft Final Verdict, which is their single target used legendary. You have Assassination Rogue, which gets to recraft their newly crafted Doomblade, That could be annoying. Doomblade was giga buffed back during the times where Assassination was buffed, you know, between January and like February and March. So people started crafting Doomblade, and now you have to recraft it again because it's gonna be in a Shards of Domination slot. Outlaw Rogue has to change Celerity, which is their to-go legendary as well. Subtlety Rogue as well, with Finality and Akari's Soul Fragment. It's basically their two most used legendaries. Nope, recrafted. Same can be said for Enhancement with Doomwinds, another legendary which will need to be recrafted. Arms Warriors and Fury Warriors will both need to recraft their Signet of Tormented Kings, which has been one of their most used legendary since the release of this expansion. When we move over to range DPS, Inescapable Balance of All Things for Balanced Druid will have to be recrafted. It's their to-go legendary, at least in 9.0.5. Maybe some things are going to change in 9.1, but you will have to recraft your Balance of All Things legendary unless you already crafted it in the pants. Because between pants and boots, there have been quite a few Balanced Druids who did not craft it in the boots. They crafted it in the pants already, so this could actually be just fine for Balanced Druids. When it comes to BM, it's a disaster because Lilac Stalker, Soulforge Embers and Dire Command all will require to be recrafted, as well as Marksmanship, of course. Serpent Stalker's Trickery, the most used legendary for Marksmanship, will have to be recrafted. Same for Arcane Mage, Arcane Harmony and Temporal Warp, as well as Fire Mage. The old most used legendary, Feathered Incantation, and the new most used legendary, Disciplinary Command, all need to be recrafted. Freezing Winds for Frost Mage as well. And then Shadow Priest, which gets hit everywhere. You want to AoE, Shadow Flame Prism needs to be recrafted. You want to single target, Talbadar Stratagem needs to be recrafted. You want to be in the Cuck Shed of a support, Twins of the Sun Priestess has to be recrafted. Elemental Shaman is also hit in the same way of Shadow Priest. You want to single target, Wind Speaker's Lava Resurgence needs to be recrafted. You want to AoE, Echoes of the Great Sundering needs to be recrafted, and you want to do some Spread Cleave, AoE, etc, etc. Skybreaker's Fiery Demise needs to be recrafted. The boring / used for everything legendaries for Warlock, Relic of Demonic Synergy and Wilfred Sigil are all going to be recrafted in 9.1, and the only special legendary, the only spec-specific legendary is going to be Grim's Inquisitor's Dread Calling for Demonology. Now, those are all of the legendaries for all of the specs that will require to be recrafted, unless, as mentioned one last time, you already crafted them in these lots to begin with. Now, some of these lots were perfectly fine before, like if you were a Shadow Priest and you had to choose between the belt and the pants to craft Talbadar Stratagem, you might have crafted this in the pants already, so you won't really need to recraft it. Or maybe you had to choose between a weird small slot, like you were a warrior. When you crafted Signet of Tormented Kings, you had to choose only between wrists and finger. Both slots are pretty ugly, both slots have pretty small stats, fingers don't even have a primary stat, so maybe you crafted it on the finger already, and you're safe if you did so. But for many other of these legendaries, there wasn't really an option. You know, if you had to choose between a helmet and a cloak, or a chest and the wrist, or the shoulders and the boots, many people simply defaulted to the good advice, because it was good advice, of crafting it in the biggest possible piece, the piece that gave you the most amount of stats. That was the good advice. Which is also why some people expected some sort of payoff, some sort of refund from Blizzard. Yeah, sure, adding an extra slot, adding an extra craftable slot to the legendary so you can recraft it in a different slot is just the bare minimum. You know, it's not a refund, it's nothing, you know, that's just expected. Maybe, for example, allowing you to disenchant your legendary at the Rune Carver, even for just 50% of the Soul Ash back, or something like that, would have been enough. Because if Blizzard goes ahead and add a craftable slot to all of the legendaries that are in conflict with Shards of Domination, it means they are recognizing, they are saying, whoops, this is going to be a problem going forward. So they are saying that they understand the problem. So I think the refund would have been a good addition to this entire new system, which is going to become needlessly complicated with all of this recrafting stuff. And with this crafting PSA, we are done for the day. We have gone over all of the specs, legendaries, and which of the specs and classes we'll have to go and think about recrafting some of the legendaries for 9.1. Now, take in mind that although 9.1 is close, and although you will want to have this done eventually, sooner or later, you don't have a rush, okay? This is only going to be required and effective and needed the moment you actually loot the item with the Shards of Domination in the same slot of your legendary. So yes, there is going to be a helmet piece with a Shard of Domination, which is why you need to recraft your helmet legendary. However, and I don't wish this upon you, you might be looting this helmet piece in about 6 weeks. You know, it's not written anywhere that within the first couple of weeks of 9.1 you will have all 5 different Shards of Domination pieces. So yes, you need to recraft your legendaries, but it's not that the moment 9.1 launches you will lose 50% of your power if you have not recrafted your legendary or some shit like that. It's just, something you have to start working towards. Even if you have no Soul Ash now, it's irrelevant, okay? With the boost in Soul Ash farming you can have once 9.1 hits, you're gonna be perfectly fine to catch up in the crafting of your tier 4 legendaries that you have to recraft. So this is just to point out that some of the legendaries will have to be recrafted, but not really to put any haste or any hurry or trying to freak out people when it comes to the power and the importance of this recrafting, okay? It is necessary and it will be necessary eventually deeper into the tier, but you don't have to be that hasty or just that freaked out about it yet. So we can stop here for the day. Thank you guys for watching the video. Thank you for supporting the channel, etc, etc. Do the usual stuff, blah blah blah. I have to leave. I have to leave because it looks like it's starting to rain very soon. Yes, it's 33 degrees and it's about to rain. Indeed. See you guys soon. And in the meantime, nothing. In the meantime, I hope it's not gonna fucking rain. Literally the moment I step my foot outside the door.